The Flower Ornament Sutra, Book 38, Detachment from the World. At that time, the world-honored one was in the country of Magadha, in the forest, in the shrine of universal light at the site of enlightenment, sitting on a lotus lion seat. He had completely fulfilled ineffable enlightenment, put an end to afflictions and views, and arrived at formless truth. Abiding in the abode of Buddhas, he had attained the equanimity of Buddhas and arrived at non-obstruction in the state of imperturbability. All his actions were unimpeded. He stood in the inconceivable and saw through all time. His body continually pervaded all lands. His knowledge always comprehended all things. He understood all activities. He exhausted all doubts. His knowledge was that sought by all enlightening beings. He had arrived at the non-dual, ultimate perfection of Buddhahood and fully attained the equal liberation of the enlightened. He had realized the stage of impartiality of Buddhas, which is without extremes or middle, extending throughout the cosmos, equal to space. He was with as many great enlightening beings as atoms in untold quadrillions of Buddha lands, all of whom were to attain unexcelled, complete, perfect enlightenment in one lifetime, and had come from various lands in other regions. All of them were endowed with the means and wisdom of enlightening beings. That is, they skillfully observed sentient beings and civilized them by the power of appropriate means, so that they would live by the way of enlightening beings. They skillfully observed all worlds and went to them by the power of appropriate means. They skillfully examined the realm of nirvana and meditated on it and assessed it. They did away with all false conceptions and cultivated sublime practices without interruption. They were well able to take care of all sentient beings. They skillfully penetrated the principles of infinite, liberative means. They knew sentient beings are empty and have no existence, yet they did not deny the fruits of action. They knew the various differences in the compulsions, faculties, spheres, and means of sentient beings' minds. They were able to absorb and hold the teachings of Buddhas of past, present, and future, to understand them themselves, and also explain them to others. They were well versed in all mundane and transmundane things, and knew their true reality. They examined all compounded and uncompounded things, and knew them to be non-dual. In a single moment of thought, they were able to acquire all the knowledge and wisdom of the Buddhas of all times. They were able to show attainment of true awakening moment to moment, to cause sentient beings to become inspired and attain the way. They knew the spheres of all sentient beings in the mental objects of one sentient being. Though they entered the stage of the enlightened, they did not give up the works carried out by enlightening beings. Their deeds, knowledge, and means did not fabricate anything. They stayed in the world for countless ages for each and every sentient being. Yet they were hard to meet, even in incalculable eons. They turned the wheel of the true teaching, pacifying sentient beings without fail. They had already fulfilled the pure, practical commitments of the Buddhas of past, present, and future. They had perfected infinite such virtues, so that even if all the Buddhas spoke for boundless eons, they could not tell of them all. Their names were universally good, universal eye, universal emanation, universal wisdom, universal vision, universal light, universal contemplation, universal illumination, universal symbol, universal awareness, and so on. There were as many such enlightening beings as atoms in untold quadrillions of Buddha lands. All of them had accomplished the vow of practice of universal good. Their profound determination and great vows were already fulfilled. They travelled to all places where Buddhas were appearing in the world, requested them to turn the wheel of teaching, and were well able to receive and hold the eye of truth of the Buddhas, perpetuating the lineage of Buddhas. They knew the order of all Buddhas' appearance in the world, and giving instructions, their names, countries, attainment of enlightenment, and turning the wheel of teaching. In worlds where there were no Buddhas, they appeared and became Buddhas, able to purify defiled sentient beings, able to destroy the action obstructions of enlightening beings, and enter the unimpeded, pure realm of reality. Then the great enlightening being, universally good, entered a vast concentration called Buddha Flower Array. When he entered this concentration, all worlds quaked in 6 ways, moving in 18 ways, producing a tremendous sound that none did not hear. After that, he rose from concentration. At that point, the enlightening being, universal wisdom, knowing the congregation had assembled, asked the enlightening being, universally good, "Please tell us, what are the reliances of great enlightening beings? What are their extraordinary thoughts? What are their practices? What are their spiritual friends? What are their exertions of energy? What are their attainments of peace of mind? What are their ways of developing sentient beings? What are their precepts? How do they receive the prediction of enlightenment? How do they enter into the state of enlightening beings? What are their entries into enlightenment? What are their penetrations of the activities of sentient beings? What are their entries into worlds? What are their entries into ages? What are their explanations of past, present, and future? What are their entries into past, present, and future? What are their developments of a tireless mind? What are their knowledges of differentiation? What are their mental masteries? What are their explanations of Buddha? What are their developments of the universally good mind? What are their principles of universally good practice? For what reasons do they generate great compassion? What are the causes of their development of the will for enlightenment? What are their expressions of respect to spiritual friends? What are their purities? What are their transcendent ways? What are their conscious knowledges? What are their realizational knowledges? What are their powers? What are their impartialities? What are their expressions of the true meaning of the Buddha teaching? What are their teachings? What do they preserve? What are their intellectual powers? What are their masteries? What are their qualities of non-attachment? What are their equanimities? What are their generations of knowledge? What are their magical displays? What are their supports of powers? What are their attainments of great joy and solace? What are their profound penetrations of the Buddha teaching? What are their bases? What are their developments of fearlessness? What are their developments of minds free from doubt? What are their inconceivabilities? What are their skillful esoteric sayings? What are their skillful analytic knowledges? What are their entries into concentration? What are their universal entries? What are their doors of liberation? What are their spiritual powers? What are their insights? What are their liberations? What are their groves? What are their palaces? What are their enjoyments? What are their adornments? What are their developments of an unshakable mind? What are their profound, great determinations they don't give up? What are their contemplations? What are their explanations of things? What are their purities? What are their definitive marks? What are their illuminations of knowledge? What are their peerless states? What are their indomitable attitudes? What are their outstanding minds? What are their oceanic knowledges entering unexcelled enlightenment? What are their jewel-like states? What are their adamantine commitments to universal enlightenment? What are their great undertakings? What are their ultimate great tasks? What are their indestructible faiths? What are their ways of receiving the prediction of enlightenment? What are their dedications of roots of goodness? What are their attainments of wisdom? What are their developments of a boundlessly broad mind? What are their hidden treasuries? What are their rules of behavior? What are their controls? What are their unimpeded functions? What are their unimpeded functions in respect to sentient beings? What are their unimpeded functions in respect to lands? What are their unimpeded functions in respect to phenomena and principles? What are their unimpeded functions in respect to bodies? What are their unimpeded functions in respect to vows? What are their unimpeded functions in respect to realms? What are their unimpeded functions of knowledge? What are their unimpeded functions of spiritual capacities? What are their unimpeded functions of miraculous abilities? What are their unimpeded functions of power? What are their versatilities? What are their spheres? What are their powers? What are their fearlessnesses? What are their unique qualities? What are their activities? What are their bodies? What are their physical actions? What is their speech? What is their purification of speech? What are the protections they receive? What are their accomplishments of great works? What are their minds? What are their determinations? What are their comprehensive minds? What are their profound minds? What do they strive to practice? What are their certain understandings? What are their certain understandings of worlds? What are their certain understandings of beings? What are their habit energies? What are their graspings? What do they cultivate? What are their accomplishments of Buddha teachings? What makes them regress from the way of Buddha teachings? What are their paths of emancipation? What are their qualities of certainty? What are their ways of generating the qualities of Buddhahood? What are their appellations of greatness? What are their paths? What are their infinite paths? What are their aids to enlightenment? What are their ways of cultivation? What are their ways of adornment? What are their feet? What are their hands? What are their guts? What are their internal organs? What are their hearts? What is their armor? What are their weapons? What are their heads? What are their eyes? What are their ears? What are their noses? What are their tongues? What are their bodies? What are their minds? What is their action? What is their abiding? What is their sitting? What is their reclining? What are their dwelling places? What are their spheres of action? What are their observations? What are their universal observations? What is their springing? What is their lion's roar? What is their pure giving? What is their pure discipline? What is their pure tolerance? What is their pure energy? What is their pure concentration? What is their pure wisdom? What is their pure benevolence? What is their pure compassion? What is their pure joy? What is their pure equanimity? What are their principles? What are their pure laws? What are their virtues used to foster enlightenment? What are their knowledges used to foster enlightenment? What are their sufficiencies of insight? What are their quests for truth? What are their understandings of truth? What are their norms of practice? What are demons? What are demons' actions? How are the actions of demons gotten rid of? What are visions of Buddha? What are actions of Buddha? What are actions of conceit? What are actions of knowledge? What is possession by demons? What is being supported by Buddha? What is being supported by truth? What do enlightening beings do while living in the heaven of satisfaction? Why do they die in that heaven? Why do they appear to abide in the womb? Why do they manifest subtle processes? Why do they manifest birth? Why do they manifest a smile? Why do they show the act of walking 7 steps? Why do they appear as children? Why do they appear to live in a palace? Why do they appear to leave home? Why do they demonstrate austerities? How do they go to the site of enlightenment? How do they sit on the site of enlightenment? What are the extraordinary signs when they sit on the site of enlightenment? Why do they demonstrate the conquering of demons? What are the attainments of the power of the enlightened? How do they turn the wheel of teaching? How are good and pure ways acquired due to the turning of the wheel of teaching? Why do the enlightened ones manifest extinction in final nirvana? Please explain these things to us. Then the great enlightening being, universally good, said to universal wisdom and the others, Offspring of Buddha, great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of reliance. They take the determination for enlightenment as a reliance. They never forget it. They take spiritual friends as a reliance, harmonizing as one. They take roots of goodness as a reliance, cultivating, gathering, and increasing them. They take the transcendent ways as a reliance, fully practicing them. They take all truths as a reliance, as they ultimately end in emancipation. They take great vows as a reliance, as they enhance enlightenment. They take practices as a reliance, consummating them all. They take all enlightening beings as a reliance, because they have the same one wisdom. They take honoring the Buddhas as a reliance, because their faith is purified. They take all Buddhas as a reliance, because they teach ceaselessly like benevolent parents. These are the 10. If enlightening beings rest in these principles, they can become abodes of the unexcelled great knowledge of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of extraordinary thought. What are they? They think of all roots of goodness as their own roots of goodness. They think of all roots of goodness as seeds of enlightenment. They think of all sentient beings as vessels of enlightenment. They think of all vows as their own vows. They think of all truths as emancipation. They think of all practices as their own practices. They think of all things as teachings of Buddha. They think of all modes of language as the path of verbal expression. They think of all Buddhas as benevolent parents. They think of all Buddhas as one. These are the 10. If great enlightening beings rest on these principles, they will attain unexcelled, skillful thought. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of practice. What are they? Practice dealing with all sentient beings, to develop them all to maturity. Practice seeking all truths, to learn them all. Practice of all roots of goodness, to cause them all to grow. Practice of all concentrations, to be single-minded, without distraction. Practice of all knowledge, to know everything. Practice of all cultivations, to be able to cultivate them all. Practice dealing with all Buddha lands, to adorn them all. Practice dealing with all good companions, respecting and supporting them. Practice dealing with all Buddhas, honoring and serving them. These are the 10. If great enlightening beings rest on these principles, they will attain the practice of the unexcelled knowledge and wisdom of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of spiritual friends. What are they? Spiritual friends who cause them to persist in the determination for enlightenment. Spiritual friends who cause them to generate roots of goodness. Spiritual friends who cause them to practice the ways of transcendence. Spiritual friends who enable them to analyze and explain all truths. Spiritual friends who enable them to develop all sentient beings. Spiritual friends who enable them to attain definitive, analytic, and expository powers. Spiritual friends who cause them not to be attached to any world. spiritual friends who cause them to cultivate practice tirelessly in all ages, spiritual friends who establish them in the practice of universal good, spiritual friends who introduce them to the reaches of knowledge of all Buddhas. These are the 10. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of exertion of energy. Exertion of energy to educate all sentient beings, to enter deeply into all Buddha teachings, to purify all worlds, to practice all sciences of enlightening beings, to eliminate all evils of sentient beings, to stop the miseries of all vicious cycles, to destroy all demons, to become pure, clear eyes for all sentient beings, to honor all Buddhas, and to please all Buddhas. These are the 10. If great enlightening beings abide by these things, they will be able to fully achieve the unexcelled transcendent energy of the Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of attainment of peace of mind. What are they? Abiding themselves in the will for enlightenment, they should also induce others to abide in the will for enlightenment, to attain peace of mind. Ultimately free from anger and strife themselves, they should also free others from anger and strife, to attain peace of mind. Free from the state of ordinary ignorance themselves, they also free others from the state of ordinary ignorance, and attain peace of mind. Diligently cultivating roots of goodness themselves, they also induce others to cultivate roots of goodness, and attain peace of mind. Persisting in the path of the transcendent ways themselves, they also induce others to abide in the path of the transcendent ways, and attain peace of mind. Being born themselves in the house of Buddha, they should also enable others to be born in the house of Buddha, to attain peace of mind. Deeply penetrating the real truth of absence of intrinsic nature, they also introduce others into the real truth of absence of inherent nature, and attain peace of mind. Not repudiating any of the Buddha's teachings, they also cause others not to repudiate any of the Buddha's teachings, and attain peace of mind. Fulfilling the vow of all-knowing enlightenment, they also enable others to fulfill the vow of all-knowing enlightenment, and attain peace of mind. Entering deeply into the inexhaustible treasury of knowledge of all Buddhas, they also lead others into the inexhaustible treasury of knowledge of all Buddhas, and attain peace of mind. These are the 10. If great enlightening beings abide by these principles, they will attain the peace of the supreme knowledge of the Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 ways of developing sentient beings: by giving, by their physical bodies, by teaching, by cooperation, by non-attachment, by showing the practices of enlightening beings, by clearly showing all worlds, by showing the great magnificent qualities of the Buddha teachings, by various manifestations of spiritual powers, and by various subtle, skillful means. These are 10 ways in which enlightening beings develop and perfect the realm of sentient beings. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of precepts: not giving up the determination for enlightenment, leaving behind the stages of individual salvation, observing and benefiting all sentient beings, inducing all sentient beings to live by the teachings of Buddha, cultivating all the sciences of enlightening beings, not being acquisitive in respect to anything, dedicating all roots of goodness to enlightenment, not being attached to any of the incarnations of Buddhas, reflecting on all things and getting rid of grasping and clinging, and regulating all their faculties. These are the 10. If great enlightening beings abide by these principles, they will attain the unexcelled great transcendent discipline of the Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 ways of receiving the prediction of Buddhahood, by which they know inwardly they will receive the prediction. Arousing the determination for enlightenment with extraordinary will, never giving up the practices of enlightening beings, continuing to carry out the practices of enlightening beings in all ages, practicing all Buddha teachings, having complete faith in the guidance of all Buddhas, cultivating all roots of goodness and bringing them to fulfillment, placing all sentient beings in the enlightenment of Buddhas, harmonizing and unifying with all spiritual friends, thinking of all spiritual friends as Buddhas, perpetually preserving the fundamental aspiration for enlightenment with diligence. Great enlightening beings have 10 ways of entry into the state of enlightening beings. They enter into fundamental vows, practices, precepts, ways of transcendence, attainment, different undertakings, various understandings, adornment of Buddha lands, command of spiritual powers, and manifestation of incarnation. By these they enter into the states of enlightening beings of all times. Great enlightening beings have 10 ways of entering enlightenment. They enter boundless realization of true awareness, boundless turning of the wheel of teaching, boundless means of liberation, boundless different explanations, boundless taming of sentient beings, boundless command of spiritual powers, boundless different embodiments, boundless concentrations, boundless powers and fearlessnesses, and boundless revelation of nirvana. By these great enlightening beings enter among all the enlightened ones of all time. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of penetrations of actions of sentient beings. They penetrate all sentient beings' past actions, future actions, present actions, good actions, bad actions, mental actions, actions of senses, actions of understanding, actions of afflictions and habit energies, timely and untimely actions of teaching and training. By these enlightening beings penetrate the actions of all beings. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of entry into worlds. They enter defiled worlds, pure worlds, small worlds, large worlds, worlds within atoms, subtle worlds, inverted worlds, upright worlds, worlds where there are Buddhas, and worlds where there are no Buddhas. Thereby, enlightening beings enter all worlds in the 10 directions. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of entry into ages. They enter into past ages, future ages, present ages, countable ages, uncountable ages, countable ages as uncountable ages as countable ages, all ages as not ages, non-ages as all ages, and all ages as one instant. Thereby they enter into all ages. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of explanation of past, present, and future. They speak of the past, the future of the past, and the present of the past. They speak of the past of the future, the present of the future, and the endlessness of the future. They speak of the past of the present, the future of the present, and the equality of the present. They speak of past, present, and future being the one instant of the present. These are the 10 ways by which enlightening beings explain all pasts, presents, and futures. Great enlightening beings have 10 ways of knowing the worlds of past, present, and future. They know their definitions, their speech, their deliberations, their rules, their appellations, their orders, their provisional names, their endlessness, their quiescence, and their total emptiness. Thus do enlightening beings know all things in all times. Great enlightening beings develop 10 kinds of tireless mind, honoring and serving all Buddhas tirelessly, attending all spiritual teachers tirelessly, seeking all truths tirelessly, listening to true teaching tirelessly, expounding true teaching tirelessly, educating and civilizing all sentient beings tirelessly, placing all sentient beings in the enlightenment of the Buddhas tirelessly, spending untold eons in each and every world, carrying out enlightening practices tirelessly, traveling in all worlds tirelessly, examining and pondering all Buddha teachings tirelessly. These are the 10. If enlightening beings abide by these principles, they will attain the tireless supreme knowledge of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of knowledge of differentiation. Knowledge of differentiations of sentient beings, differentiations of faculties, differentiations of consequences of action, differentiations of forms of birth, differentiations of worlds, differentiations of spheres of reality, differentiations of Buddhas, differentiations of phenomena, differentiations of times, and differentiations of all ways of speaking. If great enlightening beings rest on these principles, they will attain the Buddha's unexcelled, far-reaching knowledge of differentiation. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of mental command. Mental command of retaining what they hear, as they retain all teachings without forgetting. Mental command of practice, as they skillfully observe all things as they really are. Mental command of reflection, as they comprehend the nature of all things. Mental command of the light of the teachings, as they illumine the inconceivable attributes of Buddhahood. Mental command of concentration, as their minds are not distracted as they hear the teachings of all Buddhas of the present. Mental command of universal sound, as they understand inconceivable numbers of utterances. Mental command of all times, as they expound the inconceivable Buddha teachings of all times. Mental command of various intellectual powers, as they expound boundless Buddha teachings. Mental command of producing unobstructed ears, as they hear all the teachings of untold Buddhas. Mental command of all qualities of Buddhahood, as they are firmly established in the powers and fearlessnesses of the enlightened. If enlightening beings want to attain these things, they should study and practice diligently. Great enlightening beings speak of 10 kinds of Buddha. The Buddha of attainment of true enlightenment, the Buddha of vows, the Buddha of rewards of action, the Buddha of preservation of true teaching, the Buddha of nirvana, the Buddha of the cosmos, the Buddha of mind, the Buddha of concentration, the Buddha of fundamental nature, the Buddha adapting to mentalities. Great enlightening beings develop 10 kinds of universally good mind. They develop a mind of great benevolence, to save all beings. They develop a mind of great compassion, to bear suffering in place of all beings. They develop a mind of total giving, relinquishing all they have. They develop a mind that thinks of omniscience above all, gladly seeking all Buddha teachings. They develop a mind adorned with virtues, learning all practices of enlightening beings. They develop an adamantine mind, so as not to become heedless wherever they may live. They develop an oceanic mind, as all pure qualities flow in. They develop a mind like a mountain, enduring all harsh words. They develop a peaceful mind, giving to all sentient beings without fear. They develop a mind with ultimate transcendent wisdom, skillfully observing that all things have no existence. If enlightening beings establish these minds, they will soon be able to achieve the skillful knowledge of the enlightening being, universally good. Great enlightening beings have 10 principles of universally good practice. vowing to live through all future ages, vowing to serve and honor all Buddhas of the future, vowing to settle all sentient beings in the practice of universally good enlightening beings, vowing to accumulate all roots of goodness, vowing to enter all ways of transcendence, vowing to fulfill all practices of enlightening beings, vowing to adorn all worlds, vowing to be born in all Buddha lands, vowing to carefully examine all things, vowing to attain supreme enlightenment in all Buddha lands. If enlightening beings practice these principles diligently, they will soon be able to fulfill the practical undertakings of universal good. Great enlightening beings arouse great compassion by 10 kinds of observation of sentient beings. They see sentient beings have nothing to rely on for support. They see sentient beings are unruly. They see sentient beings lack virtues. They see sentient beings are asleep in ignorance. They see sentient beings do bad things. They see sentient beings are bound by desires. They see sentient beings are sunk in the sea of birth and death. They see sentient beings chronically suffer from illness. They see sentient beings have no desire for goodness. They see sentient beings have lost the way to enlightenment. Enlightening beings always observe sentient beings with these awarenesses. There are 10 kinds of causes of enlightening beings' development of the will for enlightenment. They become determined to reach enlightenment, to educate and civilize all sentient beings, to remove the mass of suffering of all sentient beings, to bring complete peace and happiness to all sentient beings, to eliminate the delusion of all sentient beings, to bestow enlightened knowledge on all sentient beings, to honor and respect all Buddhas, to follow the guidance of the Buddhas and please them, to see the marks and embellishments of the physical embodiments of all Buddhas, to comprehend the vast knowledge and wisdom of all Buddhas, and to manifest the powers and fearlessnesses of the Buddhas. When enlightening beings develop the will for supreme enlightenment and attend and serve spiritual teachers in order to awaken omniscient knowledge, they should generate 10 kinds of spirit: a spirit of service, a spirit of joy, a spirit of non-contention, a spirit of docility, a spirit of not seeking anything else, a spirit of wholehearted devotion, a spirit of having the same virtues, a spirit of having the same vows, a spirit of being in the presence of enlightenment, a spirit of cooperation in perfection of action. If great enlightening beings arouse such spirits, they will attain 10 kinds of purity: purity of profound determination, reaching the ultimate end without corruption; purity of physical embodiment, appearing according to need; purity of voice, comprehending all speech; purity of intellectual powers, skillfully explaining boundless Buddha teachings; purity of wisdom, getting rid of the darkness of all delusion; purity of taking on birth, being imbued with the power of freedom of enlightening beings; purity of company, having fully developed the roots of goodness of sentient beings they worked with in the past; purity of rewards, having removed all obstructions caused by past actions; purity of great vows, being one in essence with all enlightening beings; purity of practices, riding the vehicle of universal good to emancipation. Great enlightening beings have 10 transcendent ways: transcendent giving, relinquishing all they have; transcendent discipline, keeping the precepts of Buddhas pure; transcendent tolerance, abiding in the tolerance and forbearance characteristic of the enlightened; transcendent vigor, not regressing in whatever they do; transcendent meditation, focusing their minds on one point; transcendent wisdom, observing all things as they truly are. Transcendent knowledge, entering into the powers of Buddhas. Transcendent vowing, fulfilling the great vows of universal good. Transcendent spiritual powers, demonstrating all autonomous actions. Transcendent teaching, penetrating all Buddha's teachings. If enlightening beings abide by these principles, they will attain the supreme transcendent knowledge of the Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of conscious knowledge. Conscious knowledge of the infinite differentiations of all worlds. Conscious knowledge of the inconceivability of all realms of sentient beings. Conscious knowledge of all things, each individual being immanent in the variegated manifold, and the variegated manifold being immanent in each individual unit. Conscious knowledge of the vastness of all spheres of reality. Conscious knowledge of the ultimacy of all realms of space. Conscious knowledge of all worlds entering the past. Conscious knowledge of all worlds entering the future. Conscious knowledge of all worlds entering the present. Conscious knowledge of the infinite undertakings and vows of all Buddhas reaching fulfillment in one knowledge. Conscious knowledge that the Buddhas of past, present, and future all attain emancipation by one and the same practice. By these, enlightening beings can attain the illumination of mastery of all truths. Their vows will all be fulfilled, and they will be instantly able to understand all Buddha's techniques and attain true enlightenment. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of realizational knowledge. They know the unity of all things. They know the infinity of all things. They know the presence of all things in a single instant. They know the interpenetration of mental activities of all sentient beings. They know the equality of faculties of all sentient beings. They know the impassioned habitual activities of all sentient beings. They know the mental compulsions of all sentient beings. They know the good and bad acts of all sentient beings. They know all enlightening beings' vows and practices, masteries, preservation of the teaching, and mystical transfigurations. They know all Buddha's fulfillment of the 10 powers and attainment of true enlightenment. By these, enlightening beings can attain skillful use of all the teachings. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of power. The power to comprehend the inherent essence of all things. The power to comprehend that all things are like phantoms. The power to comprehend that all things are like illusions. The power to comprehend that all things are Buddha's teachings. The power to have no attachments to anything at all. The power to clearly understand all things. The power of the respectful mind, never abandoning spiritual teachers. The power to cause all roots of goodness to reach supreme knowledge. The power of deep faith in all Buddha's teachings without rejection. The power of skill in preventing the will for omniscience from backsliding. Based on these powers, enlightening beings can acquire the supreme powers of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of impartiality. Impartiality toward all sentient beings, all things, all lands, all determinations, all roots of goodness, all enlightening beings, all vows, all ways of transcendence, all practices, and all Buddhas. If enlightening beings abide by these principles, they will attain the supreme impartiality of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of expression of the true meaning of the Buddha's teaching. That is, all things only have names. All things are like illusions. All things are like reflections. All things only originate conditionally. All things are pure in action. All things are just made by words. All things are the ultimate reality. All things are signless. All things are the highest truth. All things are the realm of reality. Great enlightening beings expound 10 kinds of teaching: the teaching of profundity, the teaching of enormity, the teaching of variegation, the teaching of omniscience, the teaching of following the ways of transcendence, the teaching of generating the powers of the enlightened, the teaching of the interrelation of past, present, and future, the teaching of causing enlightening beings not to regress, the teaching of praising the virtues of Buddhas, the teaching of the sciences of all enlightening beings, the equality of all Buddhas, and the interrelation of all spheres of enlightenment. Based on these principles, enlightening beings can accomplish the supremely skillful preaching of the Buddhas. Great enlightening beings preserve 10 things. They preserve all the virtues they have accumulated, all the teachings spoken by all Buddhas, all similes, all means of access to true principles, all means of generating mental command, all means of removing doubt and confusion, means of perfecting all enlightening beings, the equal doors of concentration explained by all Buddhas, the ways of ingress into the illumination of all truths, and the free exercise of spiritual powers of all Buddhas. Based on these principles, enlightening beings can attain the power of preservation of supreme knowledge of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of intellectual power: the intellectual power of not arbitrarily discriminating among things, the intellectual power of not fabricating anything, the intellectual power of not being attached to anything, the intellectual power of realizing emptiness, the intellectual power of freedom from the darkness of doubt, the intellectual power of receiving support from Buddha in all things, the intellectual power of spontaneous awareness of all truths, the intellectual power of skill in differentiation of expressions of all truths, the intellectual power of truthfully explaining all things, the intellectual power of gladdening all sentient beings according to their mentalities. Based on these principles, enlightening beings can attain the supremely skillful intellectual powers of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of mastery: mastery of educating and civilizing all sentient beings, mastery of illumining all truths, mastery of cultivating all virtuous practices, mastery of extensive knowledge, mastery of the discipline of non-reliance, mastery of directing all routes of goodness to enlightenment, mastery of undiminishing energy, mastery of wisdom crushing all demons, mastery of inducing the determination for enlightenment according to inclinations, mastery of manifesting attainment of true enlightenment according to the needs of those to be taught. Based on these principles, enlightening beings can attain the mastery of the supreme knowledge of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of non-attachment: non-attachment to all worlds, all sentient beings, all phenomena, all actions, all routes of goodness, all places of birth, all vows, all practices, all enlightening beings, and all Buddhas. Based on these principles, enlightening beings can quickly overturn all concepts and attain supreme pure wisdom. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of equanimity: equanimity in accumulating all virtues, equanimity in undertaking all different vows, equanimity in regard to all living beings, equanimity in regard to the consequences of actions of all living beings, equanimity in regard to all phenomena, equanimity in regard to all pure and defiled lands, equanimity in regard to all phenomena, equanimity in regard to the understandings of all sentient beings, equanimity in regard to non-conceptualization of all practices, equanimity in regard to the non-difference of all Buddha's powers, equanimity in regard to the wisdom of all Buddhas. If enlightening beings rest in these, they will attain the supreme great equanimity of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 ways of generating knowledge. They generate knowledge by knowing the understandings of all sentient beings, knowing the various distinctions of all Buddha lands, knowing the domains of the network of the 10 directions, knowing all worlds, inverted, upright, and so on, knowing the unity, variety, and universality of all things, knowing all the various physical forms, knowing the misconceptions and delusions of all worldlings without clinging to them, knowing that all truths ultimately lead to emancipation by one path, knowing the spiritual power of the enlightened can enter all universes, knowing that the seed of enlightenment in all sentient beings, past, present, and future, does not die out. Based on these principles, enlightening beings can comprehend all things. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of magical displays. Magical display of all sentient beings, all bodies, all lands, all gifts, all voices, all practical undertakings, all education and civilization of sentient beings, all attainments of true enlightenment, all explanations of truth, and all empowerments. Based on these phenomena, enlightening beings can acquire all means of supreme magical displays. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of support of power. Support by the power of Buddhas, support by the power of truth, support by the power of sentient beings, support by the power of acts, support by the power of practices, support by the power of vows, support by the power of the environment, support by the power of time, support by the power of good, and support by the power of knowledge. Based on these, enlightening beings can gain the support of the power of supreme mastery of all truths. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of great joy and solace. Enlightening beings determine to follow, serve, and please all Buddhas that emerge in the world throughout the future. Thinking of this, they become very happy. They also determine to honor those Buddhas with the best of offerings. Thinking of this, they become very happy. They also think, when I make offerings to those Buddhas, they will surely teach me, and I will faithfully listen with respect and practice according to the teaching, and will surely always be born in the state of enlightening beings. And thinking this, they become very happy. They also think, I shall carry out the practices of enlightening beings for untold eons, and always be with the enlightening beings and Buddhas, and they become very happy at this thought. They also think, the fears I had in the past before I set my heart on supreme enlightenment, fear of not being able to live, fear of a bad reputation, fear of death, fear of falling into miserable conditions, fear of the authority of the crowd, have all gone since I set my mind on enlightenment, so that I no longer fear, am not afraid, cannot be intimidated, and cannot be hurt by any demons or cultists. With these thoughts, they become very happy. They also think, I shall enable all sentient beings to attain supreme enlightenment. After they attain enlightenment, I shall cultivate the practices of enlightening beings in the company of those Buddhas for as long as they live, faithfully provide them with offerings appropriate to Buddhas, and after they pass away, set up innumerable monuments to each of them, honor their relics, and preserve the teachings they leave. With these thoughts, they become very happy. They also think, I shall array all worlds with the finest adornments, filling them with all kinds of marvels, equally pure. I shall also cause all kinds of spiritual powers, sustaining forces, tremors, and shining lights to pervade them all. With these thoughts, they become very happy. They also think, I shall put an end to the doubts and confusions of all sentient beings, purify all sentient beings' desires, open up all sentient beings' minds, annihilate all sentient beings' afflictions, close the doors of the states of misery for all sentient beings, open the doors of states of felicity for all sentient beings, break through the darkness of all sentient beings, give light to all sentient beings, cause all sentient beings to get free from the action of demons, and cause all sentient beings to reach the abode of peace. With these thoughts, they become very happy. Great enlightening beings also think, the Buddhas are as rare and difficult to meet with as the Udumbara flower, which one can hardly get to see once in countless ages. In the future, when I want to see a Buddha, I will immediately be able to do so. The Buddhas will never abandon me, but will always be with me, allow me to see them, and constantly expound the teaching to me. After I have heard the teaching, my mind will be purified, free from deviousness, straightforward, and free from falsehood, and I will always see the Buddhas in each moment of thought. With these thoughts they become very happy. They also think, in the future I shall attain Buddhahood, and by the spiritual power of the enlightened will show the attainment of enlightenment individually to all sentient beings in all worlds, pure and fearless, roaring the great lion's roar, pervading the cosmos with my original universal undertaking, beating the drum of truth, showering the rain of truth, performing the giving of true teaching, perpetually expounding the truth, with physical, verbal, and mental action sustained by great compassion, untiring. With these thoughts they become very happy. Based on these 10 kinds of great joy and solace, enlightening beings can attain the unexcelled great joy and solace of the knowledge and wisdom of true enlightenment. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of profound penetration of the Buddha's teachings. They penetrate all worlds of the past. They penetrate all worlds of the future. They penetrate the numbers, patterns, explanations, and purities of worlds of the present. They penetrate the variety of all worlds. They penetrate the various actions and consequences of all sentient beings. They penetrate the various practices of all enlightening beings. They know the order of appearance of all Buddhas of the past. They know the order of appearance of all Buddhas of the future. They know the lands and congregations of all Buddhas present in the cosmos, their teaching and training. They know principles of the world, principles of Buddhist disciples, principles of individual illuminates, principles of enlightening beings, and principles of Buddhas. But though they know all these principles, they have no discrimination, and yet expound various principles. They thoroughly penetrate the realm of reality, because there is nothing to penetrate. According to these principles, they penetrate the most profound essence of the great knowledge and wisdom of unexcelled, complete, perfect enlightenment. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of basis on which they carry out their practices. They carry out the practices of enlightening beings based on honoring all Buddhas, taming all sentient beings, associating with all good companions, accumulating all roots of goodness, purifying all Buddha lands, entering deeply into all transcendent ways, fulfilling all vows of enlightening beings, and on infinite will for enlightenment and the enlightenment of all Buddhas. Based on these, enlightening beings carry out their practices. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of development of fearlessness. They develop fearlessness, annihilating all obstructing actions, preserving the true teaching after the extinction of Buddhas, conquering all demons, not begrudging their bodies and lives, smashing all the false arguments of heretics, gladdening all sentient beings, causing all congregations to rejoice, taming all spirits, goblins, titans, sprites and serpents, leaving the states of the two lesser vehicles of individual salvation, and entering the most profound teaching, and carrying out enlightening practices tirelessly for untold eons. Based on these, enlightening beings can obtain the supreme fearlessness of great knowledge of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 ways of developing a mind free from doubt. They make this determination: I shall take care of all sentient beings by giving. I shall take care of all sentient beings by ethical conduct, tolerance, vigor, meditation, wisdom, benevolence, compassion, joy, and equanimity. When they make this determination, they are definitely free from doubt. No doubt can arise in their minds. This is their first way of developing a mind free from doubt. Great enlightening beings also think, when the future Buddhas appear in the world, I shall serve and honor them in all ways. When they make this determination, they are definitely free from doubt. No doubt can arise in their minds. This is their second development of a mind free from doubt. Great enlightening beings also think, I shall adorn all worlds with various marvelous webs of light. When they make this determination, they are definitely free from doubt. No doubt can arise in their minds. This is the third development of a mind free from doubt. Great enlightening beings also think, I shall cultivate the practices of enlightening beings throughout all future ages, and fully develop countless sentient beings throughout the entire cosmos by means of the supreme methods of teaching and taming. When they make this determination, they are definitely free from doubt. No doubt can arise in their minds. This is the fourth development of a mind free from doubt. Great enlightening beings also think, I shall cultivate the practices of enlightening beings, fulfill the great vows, acquire omniscience, and abide therein. When they make this determination, they are definitely free from doubt. No doubt can arise in their minds. This is the fifth development of a mind free from doubt. Great enlightening beings also think, I shall carry out the practices of enlightening beings for the sake of all beings in the world, become a pure light of all truths, and illumine all the teachings of Buddhas. When they make this determination, they are definitely free from doubt. No doubt can arise in their minds. This is the sixth development of a mind free from doubt. Great enlightening beings also think, I should know all things are Buddha teachings and explain them to sentient beings according to their mentalities to enlighten them all. When they make this determination, they are definitely free from doubt. No doubt can arise in their minds. This is the seventh development of a mind free from doubt. Great enlightening beings also think, I shall attain the way to non-obstruction in the midst of all things, by knowing that all obstructions are ungraspable. Thus their minds are free from doubt, and they abide in the essence of truth, finally to attain supreme, complete, perfect enlightenment. When they make this determination, they are definitely free from doubt. No doubt can arise in their minds. This is the eighth development of a mind free from doubt. Great enlightening beings also think, I should know that all things are transmundane things, get rid of all false notions and delusions, and adorn myself with the adornment of unity, there being nothing to adorn. Here they understand by themselves and not through another. When they make this determination, they are definitely free from doubt. No doubt can arise in their minds. This is the ninth development of a mind free from doubt. Great enlightening beings also think, I should realize supreme enlightenment in regard to all things, by getting rid of all false notions and delusions, by attaining instantaneous knowledge, because unity and difference cannot be grasped, by transcending all categories, by ultimate non-fabrication of false descriptions, by detachment from all words, and by dwelling in the realm of ineffability. When they make this determination, they are definitely free from doubt. No doubt can arise in their minds. This is the 10th development of a mind free from doubt. Based on these, enlightening beings can be free from all doubt and confusion regarding all Buddha teachings. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of inconceivability. All their roots of goodness are inconceivable. All their vows are inconceivable. Their knowledge that all things are like illusions is inconceivable. Their arousal of aspiration for enlightenment and cultivation of enlightening practice without losing roots of goodness and without arbitrary notions is inconceivable. Their not grasping extinction and liberation in spite of having profoundly penetrated all things, because all their vows are not fulfilled, is inconceivable. They cultivate the path of enlightening beings and manifest the appearances of incarnation, birth, leaving home, austere practices, going to the site of enlightenment, conquering demons, achieving supreme enlightenment, teaching, and passing away, their spiritual transformations free, unceasing, not abandoning their vow of compassion, saving and protecting sentient beings. All of this is inconceivable. Though they are able to manifest the 10 powers of Buddhas and their freedom of mystical projection, yet they do not give up the mind equal to the cosmos and teach sentient beings. This is inconceivable. They know that in all things signlessness is their sign. Their signs are signlessness. Non-discrimination is discrimination. Discrimination is non-discrimination. Non-existence is existence. Existence is non-existence. Inaction is action. Action is inaction. Non-explanation is explanation. Explanation is non-explanation. This is inconceivable. They know mind is equal to enlightenment. They know enlightenment is equal to mind. They know mind and enlightenment are equal to sentient beings, yet they do not give rise to confusion of mind, confusion of thoughts, or confusion of views. This is inconceivable. From moment to moment they enter absorption in extinction and exhaust all contamination, yet they do not experience ultimate reality and do not end roots of goodness with contamination. Though they know all things are free from contamination, yet they know the end and extinction of contaminations. Though they know the principles of Buddhas are identical to the things of the world, and the things of the world are identical to the principles of Buddhas, yet they do not form notions of worldly things within the principles of Buddhas, and do not form notions of principles of Buddhas in the things of the world. All things enter the realm of reality, because there is nothing entered. They know all things are non-dual, because there is no change. This is the 10th inconceivable. These are the 10 inconceivabilities of enlightening beings. If enlightening beings abide in them, they will attain the supreme inconceivable qualities of all Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of skillful esoteric sayings. The skillful esoteric sayings in all the discourses of Buddhas, skillful esoteric sayings about all places of birth, skillful esoteric sayings about all enlightening beings' spiritual manifestations and attainment of enlightenment, skillful esoteric sayings about the consequences of actions of all sentient beings, skillful esoteric sayings about the defilement and purity produced by all sentient beings, skillful esoteric sayings about how to be ultimately unobstructed in the midst of all things, skillful esoteric sayings about how in every place in space are worlds, some becoming, some decaying, without any gaps in between, skillful esoteric sayings about how everywhere in all places, in all universes, in all phenomena, even in microscopic points, there are Buddhas manifesting birth, attainment of Buddhahood, and entry into final nirvana, filling the cosmos, each distinctly seen. Skillful esoteric sayings about seeing all sentient beings as equally nirvanic, being unchanging, yet not giving up great aspirations, causing them to be fulfilled by the vow for omniscience. Skillful esoteric sayings about not abandoning teachers in spite of knowing that truths are not realized through the agency of another. Honoring the enlightened even more, becoming one with spiritual friends in cultivating, dedicating, and living by virtues. With the same actions, the same essence, the same emancipation, the same fulfillment. Based on these, enlightening beings can master the unexcelled, skillful, esoteric speech of the Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of skillful analytic knowledge. Skillful analytic knowledge penetrating all lands. Skillful analytic knowledge penetrating all abodes of sentient beings. Skillful analytic knowledge penetrating the mental activities of all sentient beings. Skillful analytic knowledge penetrating the faculties of all sentient beings. Skillful analytic knowledge penetrating the consequences of actions of all sentient beings. Skillful analytic knowledge penetrating the practices of all Buddhist disciples. Skillful analytic knowledge penetrating the practices of all individual illuminates. Skillful analytic knowledge penetrating the practices of all enlightening beings. Skillful analytic knowledge penetrating all mundane things. Skillful analytic knowledge penetrating all principles and attributes of Buddhahood. Based on these, enlightening beings can attain the supreme knowledge of Buddhas that skillfully distinguishes all things. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of entry into concentration. Entry into concentration in all worlds. Entry into concentration in the bodies of all sentient beings. Entry into concentration in all phenomena. Entry into concentration seeing all Buddhas. Entry into concentration and remaining for all ages. Entry into concentration and manifesting inconceivable bodies on emerging entry into concentration in all Buddha bodies. Entry into concentration realizing the equality of all sentient beings. Entry into concentration instantly comprehending all enlightening beings' knowledge of concentration. Entry into concentration accomplishing all the deeds and vows of enlightening beings in one instant and never ceasing. If enlightening beings abide in these, they will attain the Buddha's supremely skillful methods of concentration. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of universal entry. Universal entry among sentient beings, into lands, into the various features of worlds, into fires, into floods, into Buddhahood, into arrays of adornments, into the embodiments of boundless virtues of Buddhas, and into all kinds of explanations of truth. Based on these, enlightening beings can attain the Buddha's means of penetrating everything by great knowledge. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of doors of liberation, pervading all worlds with one body, showing infinite various forms in all worlds, putting all worlds in one Buddha field, universally supporting all realms of sentient beings, filling all worlds with the adornment bodies of all Buddhas, seeing all worlds in one's own body, showing the emergence of all Buddhas in one world, filling all worlds with one body, and showing the free play of spiritual powers of all Buddhas in a single instant. Through these, enlightening beings can attain the supreme door of liberation of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of spiritual power. The power of knowledge of means of remembering past lives, the power of knowledge of means of unhindered clairaudience, the power of knowledge of means of knowing the inconceivably many mental actions of sentient beings, the power of knowledge of means of unobstructed clairvoyant vision, the power of knowledge of means of manifesting inconceivable great mystic powers according to the minds of sentient beings, the power of knowledge of means of appearing in infinite worlds with one body, the power of knowledge of means of entering innumerable worlds in a moment of thought, the power of knowledge of means of producing infinite adornments and adorning inconceivable worlds, the power of knowledge of means of displaying innumerable emanated bodies, the power of knowledge of means of manifesting unexcelled, complete, perfect enlightenment in untold worlds, in accord with the minds of innumerable sentient beings. Through these, enlightening beings can attain the supreme, skillful, spiritual power of Buddhas, displaying them variously to all sentient beings to make them learn. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of insight. The insight of practical knowledge of the consequences of actions of all sentient beings, the insight of practical knowledge of the quiescence, purity, and non-conceptuality of all realms of sentient beings, the insight of practical knowledge that the mental objects of all sentient beings are of but one character, totally ungraspable, and that all things are indestructible, the insight of practical knowledge of ability to cause infinite subtle utterances to be heard in all worlds, the insight of practical knowledge of how to universally destroy the obsessions of all minds, the insight of practical knowledge of how to appear to be born or not to be born by expedient means, the insight of practical knowledge of abandoning all objects of perception and sensation, the insight of practical knowledge that all things are neither forms nor formless, are of one nature, which is no nature, not discriminating anything, yet able to comprehend all kinds of truths and explain them analytically for measureless ages, abiding in the realm of reality and realizing unexcelled, complete, perfect enlightenment. Great enlightening beings know that the birth of all sentient beings is fundamentally birthless, because they comprehend that birth cannot be grasped. Yet they know causes, no conditions, no events, no objects, no actions, no birth, no extinction, no speech, no confusion, no freedom from confusion, no delusion, no freedom from delusion, no defilement, no purity, no birth and death, no nirvana, no graspability, no ungraspability, no attachment, no non-attachment, no rest, no movement, no departure, no return, no origination, no non-origination, no dissolution, no emancipation, no maturity, no faculties, no how to civilize. They teach beings according to needs, never forgetting the deeds of all enlightening beings. Why? Because enlightening beings set their minds on complete, perfect enlightenment for the sole purpose of helping sentient beings. Therefore, enlightening beings always edify sentient beings without tiring, in harmony with what is to be done in all worlds. This is called the insight of practical knowledge of interdependent origination. Great enlightening beings have no attachment to Buddha and do not develop attachments. they have no attachment to the teachings, and do not develop attachments. They have no attachment to lands, and do not develop attachments. They have no attachments to sentient beings, and do not develop attachments. They do not see that there are sentient beings, yet they carry on educational activity, civilizing and teaching ways of liberation. They do not give up the practices of enlightening beings with great compassion and great commitment. Seeing Buddhas and hearing their teachings, they act accordingly. Trusting the Buddhas, they plant roots of goodness, ceaselessly honoring and serving them. They are able to shake infinite worlds in the 10 directions by spiritual powers. Their minds are broad, being equal to the cosmos. They know various explanations of truth. They know how many sentient beings there are. They know the differences among sentient beings. They know the birth of suffering. They know the extinction of suffering, while knowing all acts are like reflected images. They carry out the deeds of enlightening beings. They sever the root of all subjection to birth. They carry out the practices of enlightening beings for the sole purpose of saving all enlightening beings, and yet do not practice anything. Conforming to the essential nature of all Buddhas, they develop a mind like an immense mountain. They know all falsehood and delusion, and enter the door of omniscience. Their knowledge and wisdom are broad and vast and unshakable, due to attain true enlightenment. This is the insight of practical knowledge of equally saving all sentient beings in the ocean of birth and death. These are the 10 insights. Based on these, enlightening beings can attain the supreme insight of practical knowledge of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of liberation. Liberation from afflictions, liberation from false views, liberation from all grasping, liberation from mental and physical elements, liberation transcending the 2 lesser vehicles of individual emancipation, liberation by accepting the non-origination of things, liberation by freedom from attachment to all worlds, all lands, all beings, and all things, liberation in infinite abodes, liberation rising from the practices of enlightening beings into the stage of non-discrimination of Buddhas, liberation able to know all pasts, presents, and futures in a single moment. Based on these, enlightening beings can perform the supreme deeds of Buddhas and teach and develop all sentient beings. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of grove. Birth and death is a grove for enlightening beings because they do not reject it. Teaching sentient beings is a grove for enlightening beings because they do not tire of it. Living in all ages is a grove for enlightening beings because they embrace all great deeds. Purifying the world is a grove for enlightening beings because it is where they themselves sojourn. All abodes of demons are a grove for enlightening beings because they conquer them all. Thinking about the teachings they hear is a grove for enlightening beings because they examine them truthfully. The 6 ways of transcendence, 4 means of integration, and 37 aids to enlightenment are a grove for enlightening beings because they succeed to the domain of the Buddha. The 10 powers, 4 fearlessnesses, 18 unique qualities, and all other aspects of Buddhahood are a grove for enlightening beings because they do not think of anything else. Manifesting the autonomous spiritual capacities of all enlightening beings is a grove for enlightening beings because they use great spiritual powers to turn the wheel of teaching unceasingly and civilize sentient beings. Instantly showing all sentient beings the attainment of true enlightenment in all places is a grove of enlightening beings, because the body of reality pervades all worlds in space. Based on these, enlightening beings can achieve the Buddha's unexcelled, peaceful, happy action, free from sorrow and affliction. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of palace. The determination for enlightenment is a palace of enlightening beings because they never forget it. The blessing and wisdom of virtuous conduct are a palace of enlightening beings because they civilize sentient beings in the realm of desire. The meditative concentrations of pure benevolence, compassion, joy, and equanimity are a palace of enlightening beings because they teach the sentient beings in the realm of form. Birth in the heaven of pure abodes is a palace of enlightening beings because no afflictions can affect them. Birth in the formless realm is a palace of enlightening beings because they enable sentient beings to escape difficult situations. Birth in the world of defilement is a palace of enlightening beings because they enable all sentient beings to cut off afflictions. Appearing to abide in a mansion with spouse, children, and retinue is a palace of enlightening beings because they develop their past associates. Appearing to dwell in the rank of ruler, celestial world guardian, Indra, or Brahma is a palace of enlightening beings in order to tame beings with the mentality of controllers. Persisting in all practices of enlightening beings, freely exercising spiritual powers, and attaining mastery of them all, is a palace of enlightening beings because they autonomously and skillfully exercise the knowledge of meditations, liberations, and concentrations. The guarantee that all Buddhas receive of coronation as a monarch of all knowledge, supremely independent, is a palace of enlightening beings because they abide among the adornments of the 10 powers and perform the autonomous deeds of all monarchs of truth. Based on these 10, enlightening beings can attain coronation by truth and freedom of spiritual powers in all worlds. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of enjoyment. They enjoy right mindfulness because their minds are not distracted. They enjoy knowledge, distinguishing all things. They enjoy visiting all Buddhas, listening to the teachings tirelessly. They like the Buddhas because they fill the 10 directions without bound. They like enlightening beings because they freely appear in infinite ways for the benefit of sentient beings. They enjoy the doors of concentration because in one door of concentration, they enter all doors of concentration. They enjoy mental command of mnemonic formulae because they hold all the doctrines without forgetting and hand them on to others. They enjoy unhindered powers of analysis and elucidation, expounding a single saying inexhaustibly. They enjoy attaining true enlightenment, manifesting bodies in infinite ways, attaining true enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. They enjoy turning the wheel of true teaching, destroying all misleading doctrines. Based on these, enlightening beings can attain the supreme enjoyment of truth of all Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of adornment. The adornment of power, being indestructible. The adornment of fearlessness, being invincible. The adornment of meaning, explaining untold meanings inexhaustibly. The adornment of doctrines, contemplating and expounding the collection of 84,000 doctrines without forgetting them. The adornment of vows, the universal vows undertaken by all enlightening beings, never regressing. The adornment of deeds, cultivating the deeds of universal good and gaining emancipation. The adornment of lands, making all lands one land. The adornment of the universal voice, showering the rain of truth throughout all Buddha worlds. The adornment of empowerment, carrying out innumerable deeds in all ages without cease. The adornment of mystic manifestations, showing in the body of one being as many bodies as there are sentient beings, causing all sentient beings to perceive them and seek all knowledge without regressing. Based on these, enlightening beings can attain the adornment of all supreme attributes of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings develop 10 kinds of unshakable mind. An unshakable mind able to give up all possessions. An unshakable mind pondering and examining all teachings of Buddha. An unshakable mind recollecting and honoring all Buddhas. An unshakable mind pledging not to harm living beings. An unshakable mind caring for all sentient beings without choosing between enemies and friends. An unshakable mind ceaselessly seeking all attributes of Buddhahood. An unshakable mind carrying out the practice of enlightening beings for untold ages without wearying or regressing. An unshakable mind perfecting well-rooted faith, clear faith, unpolluted faith, pure faith, extremely pure faith, undefiled faith, faith respecting and honoring all Buddhas, unregressing faith, inexhaustible faith, indestructible faith, and ecstatic faith. An unshakable mind believing, accepting, and not repudiating the methods of practice of enlightening beings. Based on these, enlightening beings can attain the supreme, unshakable mind of omniscience. There are 10 kinds of profound, great determinations that enlightening beings do not abandon. They do not abandon the profound, great determination to fulfill the enlightenment that all Buddhas realize, to edify and civilize all sentient beings, to perpetuate the lineage of Buddhas, to associate with all good spiritual friends, to honor all Buddhas, to wholeheartedly seek all the virtuous qualities of the great vehicle of universal salvation, to cultivate religious practice in the company of all Buddhas and maintain pure conduct, to associate with all enlightening beings, to seek the means of applying and preserving all Buddha teachings, and to fulfill all practices and vows of enlightening beings, and develop all qualities of Buddhahood. Based on these, enlightening beings will be able not to abandon all principles of Buddhahood. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of contemplation of knowledge. Contemplation of knowledge of skillfully analyzing and explaining all things, knowing all roots of goodness of past, present, and future, knowing the practices of all enlightening beings, being able to transform freely, knowing the meanings of all doctrines, knowing the powers of all Buddhas, knowing all methods of concentration formulae, expounding truth in all worlds, entering all universes, knowing all spaces are inconceivable, and knowing the light of knowledge of all Buddha teachings is unobstructed. Based on these, enlightening beings can attain the contemplation of supreme knowledge of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of explanation of things. They say all things arise from conditions. All things are like magical illusions. All things are free from contradiction. All things are boundless. All things are baseless. All things are indestructible. All things are thus. All things are quiescent. All things are emancipation. All things are one, inherently complete. Based on these, enlightening beings can skillfully explain all things. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of purity. Purity of determination, purity of cutting through doubts, purity of detachment from views, purity of perspective, purity of the quest for omniscience, purity of intellectual powers, purity of fearlessness, purity of living by the knowledge of all enlightening beings, purity of accepting all the guidelines of behavior of enlightening beings, purity of full development of the felicitous characteristics, pure qualities, and all fundamental virtues of unexcelled enlightenment. Based on these, enlightening beings can attain the supreme purity of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of definitive mark. Great enlightening beings, knowing the suffering of pain, the suffering of disintegration, and the suffering of transitoriness, single-mindedly seek the way of enlightenment. Without becoming lazy, they carry out the practices of enlightening beings, unwearied, without fear or apprehension or anxiety, not giving up this great undertaking, seeking omniscience steadfastly, not retreating, ultimately attaining unexcelled, complete, perfect enlightenment. This is their first definitive mark. Great enlightening beings, seeing that there are sentient beings who are foolish and deluded to the point of madness, reviling, attacking, and injuring one another by words and weapons, do not abandon the attitude of an enlightening being because of these scenes. They just forbear with tolerance and gentility, concentrate on cultivating the way of enlightenment, abide in the supreme path, and enter the state of detachment. This is their second definitive mark. When great enlightening beings hear explanation of the most profound teaching of Buddhas relating to omniscience, they are able by their own knowledge to deeply believe and accept it, to understand and enter into it. This is their third definitive mark. Great enlightening beings also think, having made the profound determination to seek omniscience, I shall become a Buddha and attain supreme, complete, perfect enlightenment. All sentient beings are flowing in the whirl of mundane conditions, suffering immeasurable pains. I should also get them to set their minds on enlightenment, to believe and delight in it, and to cultivate it diligently and steadfastly without regressing. This is their fourth definitive mark. Great enlightening beings know the knowledge of Buddhas is boundless and do not try to assess it in limited terms. Enlightening beings, having heard of the boundlessness of Buddha's knowledge from innumerable Buddhas, are able not to make limited assessments. Everything written or said in all worlds has limitations and cannot comprehend the knowledge of Buddhas. This is the fifth definitive mark. In regard to unexcelled, complete, perfect enlightenment, great enlightening beings have supreme desire, profound desire, vast desire, great desire, complex desire, insuperable desire, unsurpassed desire, steadfast desire, desire that cannot be destroyed by any demons or false teachers or their cohorts, unyielding desire to seek omniscience. Enlightening beings dwelling in such desire ultimately never turn back from supreme enlightenment. This is their sixth definitive mark. Great enlightening beings carry out enlightening actions without concern for their own bodies or lives. No one can discourage or frustrate them, because they proceed with determination toward all knowledge, because the essence of omniscience is always apparent to them, and because they have the light of knowledge of all Buddhas. They never give up on the enlightenment of Buddhas and never abandon the wise. This is their seventh definitive mark. When great enlightening beings see good men and women aiming for the great vehicle of universal enlightenment, they foster the growth of their determination to seek Buddhahood, cause them to stabilize all foundations of goodness, to internalize the determination for omniscience, and never to turn back from the quest for supreme enlightenment. This is their eighth definitive mark. Great enlightening beings cause all sentient beings to achieve an impartial mind and induce them to cultivate the path of universal knowledge. They explain the truth to sentient beings compassionately and cause them never to turn back on the path of enlightenment. This is their 9th definitive mark. Great enlightening beings have the same foundations of goodness as all Buddhas. They perpetuate the seed of Buddhahood and ultimately reach omniscient knowledge. This is their 10th definitive mark. These are the 10 definitive marks of enlightening beings. By these they can quickly achieve supreme perfect enlightenment and become endowed with the mark of Buddha's unexcelled knowledge of all truths. Great enlightening beings have 10 illuminations of knowledge. The illumination of knowledge of certain attainment of supreme perfect enlightenment. The illumination of knowledge seeing all Buddhas. The illumination of knowledge seeing all sentient beings dying in one place and being born in another. The illumination of knowledge understanding the doctrines of all scriptures. The illumination of knowledge developing the determination for enlightenment through association with the wise and accumulation of roots of goodness. The illumination of knowledge showing all Buddhas. The illumination of knowledge teaching all sentient beings, so they may abide in the state of enlightenment. The illumination of knowledge expounding inconceivable great means of access to truth. The illumination of knowledge skillfully comprehending the spiritual powers of all Buddhas. The illumination of knowledge fulfilling all transcendent ways. Based on these, enlightening beings can attain the illumination of supreme knowledge of all Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 peerless states, which no listeners or individual illuminates can equal. Though great enlightening beings see absolute truth, they do not grasp it as their realization, because all their vows are not yet fulfilled. This is their first peerless state. Great enlightening beings plant all roots of goodness, equal to all realities, yet do not have the slightest attachment to them. This is their second peerless state. Great enlightening beings, cultivating the practices of enlightening beings, know they are like phantoms, because all things are still and void. Yet they have no doubt about the way of Buddhahood. This is their third peerless state. Great enlightening beings, though free from the false ideas of the world, still are able to focus their attention and carry out the deeds of enlightening beings for innumerable eons, fulfill their great undertakings, and never give rise to a feeling of weariness therein. This is their fourth peerless state. Great enlightening beings do not grasp anything, because the essence of all things is void. Yet they do not experience nirvana, because the path of omniscience is not yet fulfilled. This is their fifth peerless state. Great enlightening beings know that all periods of time are not really periods of time, yet they enumerate periods of time. This is their sixth peerless state. Great enlightening beings know nothing creates anything, yet they do not give up making the way in search of Buddhahood. This is their seventh peerless state. Great enlightening beings know that the realms of desire, form, and formlessness are only mind, and that past, present, and future are only mind, yet they know perfectly well that mind has no measure and no bounds. This is their eighth peerless state. Great enlightening beings carry out enlightening actions for untold eons for sentient beings one and all, wishing to settle them in the state of omniscience, and yet they never tire or get fed up. This is their ninth peerless state. Great enlightening beings, though their cultivation of practice is completely fulfilled, still do not realize enlightenment, because they reflect, what I do is basically for sentient beings, so I should remain in birth and death and help them by expedient means, to settle them on the supreme path of enlightenment. This is their 10th peerless state. Based on these 10 peerless states, enlightening beings can attain the peerless state of supremely great knowledge and all qualities of Buddhahood. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of indomitable attitude. They think, I should conquer all celestial demons and their cohorts. This is their first indomitable attitude. They also think, I should destroy all false teachings. This is their second indomitable attitude. They also think, I should open sentient beings' minds and edify them with good words, making them all happy. This is their third indomitable attitude. They also think, I should fulfill all transcendent practices throughout the cosmos. This is their fourth indomitable attitude. They also think, I should amass all virtues. This is their fifth indomitable attitude. They also think, supreme enlightenment is vast and hard to accomplish. I should cultivate practice to bring it to complete consummation. This is their sixth indomitable attitude. They also think, I should teach and tame sentient beings with the supreme teaching and the supreme training. This is their seventh indomitable attitude. They also think, all worlds are variously different. I should attain enlightenment there in infinite bodies. This is their eighth indomitable attitude. They also think, while I am cultivating the conduct of enlightening beings, if sentient beings should come and ask me for my hands, feet, ears, nose, blood, flesh, bones, marrow, spouse, children, elephant, horse, or royal status, I should be able to give them all up without a single thought of sorrow or regret, doing so only to benefit all sentient beings, not seeking resulting rewards, beginning with great compassion and ending with great kindness. This is their ninth indomitable attitude. They also think, all in past, present, and future, all Buddhas, all Buddha teachings, all sentient beings, all lands, all worlds, all times, all realms of space, all realms of phenomena, all realms of verbal usage, all realms of tranquil nirvana, all these various things I should, by means of instantaneous discernment, know, be aware of, see, realize, cultivate, and detach from, and have no conceptions of them, being detached from conceptions, not having various notions, having no attributes, no object. They are neither existent nor non-existent, not one, not dual. I should know all duality by knowledge of non-duality, know all forms by formless knowledge, know all discriminations by non-discriminatory knowledge, know all differences by knowledge of non-difference, know all distinctions by non-differentiating knowledge, know all worlds by non-worldly knowledge, know all times by timeless knowledge, know all sentient beings by knowledge of non-existence of sentient beings, know all attachments by unattached knowledge, know all abodes by non-abiding knowledge, know all defilements by undefiled knowledge, know all ends by endless knowledge, appear physically in all worlds by ultimate knowledge of the realm of reality, make untold statements by speechless knowledge, enter absence of intrinsic nature by knowledge of one intrinsic nature, manifest various realms by knowledge of one realm, know all things are inexplicable, yet manifest free speech, realize the stage of omniscience, and manifest great spiritual powers and displays in all worlds in order to teach and tame all sentient beings. This is their 10th indomitable attitude. Based on these 10 indomitable attitudes, enlightening beings can attain the supreme quality of indomitability of Buddhas. Great enlightening beings have 10 kinds of mind outstanding like a mountain. They attentively cultivate the means of omniscience. This is the first. They always observe that the fundamental nature of all things is empty and ungraspable. This is the second. They vow to carry out the acts of enlightening beings over measureless eons, and cultivate all pure qualities, and by living according to all good and pure principles, see and know the boundless wisdom of the Buddhas. This is the third. In quest of all aspects of Buddhahood, they serve all wise teachers impartially, without seeking anything else, with no ambition to steal the teaching, with nothing but respect. They are never willful. They are able to give up everything they have. This is the fourth. If anyone reviles and slanders them, beats or wounds them, or even kills them, they can accept it all and do not become disturbed or hostile, and do not give up their universal vow of great compassion. Indeed, they continually make it grow even more, because they are truly emancipated from all things, have perfected relinquishment, realize the truth of all Buddhas, and have mastered forbearance and gentility. This is the fifth. Great enlightening beings develop overmastering great virtues. Virtue overmastering celestials. Virtue overmastering humans. Virtue overmastering form. Virtue overmastering power. Virtue overmastering dependence. Virtue overmastering desire. Virtue overmastering kingship. Virtue overmastering sovereignty. Virtue overmastering felicity. Virtue overmastering intelligence. Yet though they perfect such virtues, they are never attached to them. That is, they do not cling to enjoyment, desire, wealth, or followers. They only profoundly delight in truth, go according to truth, live according to truth, start out according to truth, end up according to truth, take truth for their reliance, take truth for their salvation, take truth for their refuge, take truth for their home. They guard the truth, love the truth, seek the truth, and ponder the truth. While great enlightening beings experience all kinds of delights of truth, they always avoid all manias, because in the past they determined to enable all sentient beings to get rid of all manias forever and abide in the realm of Buddhas. This is their sixth outstanding mind. Great enlightening beings have already practiced the way of enlightening beings diligently for immeasurable eons, in quest of unexcelled, complete, perfect enlightenment, yet they still think of themselves as just having set their hearts on enlightenment and carry out the acts of enlightening beings, without fright or fear. Though they are able to attain unexcelled, complete, perfect enlightenment in an instant, yet for the sake of sentient beings they carry out enlightening practices ceaselessly for measureless eons. This is their seventh outstanding mind. Great enlightening beings know all sentient beings are by nature not harmonious or good, and are difficult to harmonize, difficult to liberate, are heedless and ungrateful. Therefore, enlightening beings make great vows for their sake, wishing to enable them to attain mental and intellectual freedom and autonomy, to be unhindered in their actions, to give up evil thoughts, and not to afflict others. This is their eighth outstanding mind. Great enlightening beings also think, nobody makes me aspire to enlightenment, and I do not wait for others to help me cultivate practice. I aspire to enlightenment of my own accord, accumulate the qualities of enlightenment, and am determined to work on my own, traveling the path of enlightening beings forever, and accomplish unexcelled, complete, perfect enlightenment. For this reason, I now cultivate the practice of enlightening beings. I should purify my own mind and also purify others' minds. I should also know the sphere of others and know my own sphere. I should be equal in perspective to the Buddhas of all times. This is their 9th outstanding mind. Great enlightening beings perform this contemplation. There is not a single thing that cultivates the practice of enlightening beings, not a single thing that fulfills the practice of enlightening beings, not a single thing that teaches and tames all sentient beings, not a single thing that honors all Buddhas, not a single thing that has been or will be or is ever attained or explained in complete enlightenment. The teacher and the teaching are both ungraspable, yet they do not abandon unexcelled, complete, perfect enlightenment. Why? Because enlightening beings search out all things and find they cannot be grasped. This is how they develop supreme, perfect enlightenment. Therefore, although they do not obtain anything, yet they diligently cultivate dominant good actions and pure curative measures, so that their knowledge and wisdom develop fully, growing moment by moment to total repletion. They are not frightened by emptiness, and do not think, if all things are null, what is the sense of seeking the path of supreme enlightenment? This is their 10th outstanding mind. These are enlightening beings' 10 mountain-like outstanding minds, directed toward unexcelled, complete, perfect enlightenment, based on which enlightening beings can attain the mountain-like outstanding mind of supremely great knowledge of Buddhas.